I believe we are live. I believe we are live. Hello. Hello from Florida. This is Coffee with Frankie. Microphone test. 1, 2, testing, testing. Let me know if you can hear me and see me in the chat. Okay. I see we have the great Phil Adams present and accounted for. Phil, let me know if you can hear and see me okay on your end with this microphone that we had to change out from last couple of weeks ago where we had scratchy malachi on the microphone. Can't have that. So Phil, others in the chat, if there are any, let me let me know if you can hear me okay so we can move on with our program for today. This is Coffee with Frankie. I am the Frankie. This is the coffee. It is Sunday, September the 8th, 2024, and it is the first week of the NFL season. And so we got to take a look at some of these games and see what's going on over here and cover a few top topics, and then we will move on. All right, so Phil says audio 100%. Okay, good. Now, for those who don't know, Phil, the Jetty Jet Adams, just had his internet, I guess, turned back on. He's been without internet for a week. So I hope, Phil, that you got that all straightened out. I don't know what's happening over there in England where you live, but Keir Starmer needs to get his act together. I think he needs to give you a rebate. You know, that guy needs to stop the boats and he needs to rebate everybody who didn't have internet for a week because that's incredibly crazy. We can't have Phil the Jetty Jet Adams without any internet. I mean, that's not how it works. We can't have it. 2 weeks, Phil says. They owe you even more money, Phil. I mean, how the heck can you be 2 weeks without any internet? That's ridiculous. Keir Starmer needs to get off his tookus and give you a rebate because we can't have Phil Adams without internet for 2 weeks. That does not work. All of Jet Nation needs to stand up and decry this. This is not going to stand. Not for this fan base at this time. Imagine if Phil Adams didn't have internet connection as the season started. Yeah, we need to get this Keir Starmer guy who just got elected over there for prime minister, for those of you who don't know. I need to get him off his tookus, and we need to get him to stop the boats, number one. And number two, get Phil Adams fully compensated for 2 weeks without internet. We need to get him fully compensated, and then we got to make sure this never happens again, because this is an outrage. This is an outrage. We cannot have this. We cannot have this anymore. Hader Ali is here as well. Café con Frankie y NFL Game Day. Let's go, JETS. Yeah, we got to have the café con leche, a café con football. Yeah. It's a beautiful Sunday, the first week of the season. Sluggo's here. He's going to tell us all about the wing-back formation and how to run the football right down their throats. Right, Sluggo? Phil said, that's what's worrying me, missing the J. Yeah, exactly. We can't imagine this internet outage went on into the season, Phil. Then how would you know what's going on with your beloved Jets? Yeah, it's crazy. Roger is here. They have more problems than... That's why I say stop the boats first, Roger, and then then take care of the internet, Mr. Starmer. Gotta get this guy figured out over here. Joe Mike says, Frankie GM, please make some sense of the Reddick situation. Yeah, I've said and been on record, Joe, I don't understand it. I've listened to a lot of people about this issue, and nobody seems to be able to make sense of it at all. Now, the interesting thing about it is that he's represented by Tory Dandy and Jimmy Sexton of CAA. those guys are very experienced agents. In fact, I saw an interview with Tory Dandy who said that he has negotiated over $1 billion in contracts for players. So these aren't neophytes. This isn't the guy who represents Kyler Murray who had a study clause put in the contract and let his clients sign it. Dumb. These are really good agents. CAA is one of the biggest agencies in the world. They started out with entertainment. They broadened out into sports. This is not a small agency. And so what advice is Reddick getting? Then we get a report from Dirty Diana Rossini, and who knows? Her sources are usually her dogs, so who knows? But she said, this is a shield that he's willing to die on. And it makes no sense to anyone. And you would think that his representation at least would talk to the press anonymously, off record, or not off record, but anonymously, to get their side of the story out. But they haven't done that either. And then you would see talking heads like, Hughes and Rappaport and Schefter and those guys putting out what the agents want them to put out. So that's not happening. So what are the reps doing, and what is he doing? This has to be, I said on Twitter, it has to be the dumbest death of all time then. If he's willing to die on his shield, as Dirty Diana put out there, that's what he said. That's what her understanding is. He's, quote unquote, willing to die on his shield for this issue. Well, then I said, okay, well, then that's the dumbest death in all of history. Because it's the dumbest thing ever. Nobody can understand it. And all the reports I read, all the reporters, everything that's going on, there seems to be no justification from the client side. There seems to be no commentator who has an opinion who thinks it's a good idea. In fact, Michael Lombardi, famous jet hater, came out yesterday on the McAfee show and said this is dumb on Reddick's part. He didn't even criticize the Jets, as far as I understand it. He said this is dumb on the players' part. He doesn't understand it. And he hates the Jets. Remember, Michael Lombardi is a Bill Belichick flunky. Only reason anybody cares about Michael Lombardi is because he was a longtime associate of Bill Belichick and won those rings with him in New England. So, of course, he has the Belichick hatred toward the Jets, and you see that in his commentary, usually. But even he says he does not understand this from the player side. So from the GM point of view, if I'm the GM, I would have done exactly what Joe Douglas did. Now, looking back, you could say the mistake that Douglas maybe made was he should have done everything that he did and then just not trade for Reddick and instead match or exceed the offer for Jadeveon Clowney. That's a fair criticism because we could have had Jadeveon Clowney. People forget this in the sequence of events. They talk about Bryce Huff and all this, but they forget that we had Jadeveon Clowney in the office for over an hour talking to Joe Douglas. We had a very good meeting with Jadeveon Clowney, and there was significant mutual interest there. But then at the last minute, the Carolina Panthers swooped in with a 2-year, $20 million deal for him, and he's from Carolina. But he did give us an opportunity to match or exceed that offer. He did. He came back to us despite the fact that he's from Carolina and played college at Carolina. He's a Carolina guy. And he came back to us, which tells you something. He had a connection with Douglas. He wanted to play for us. And you could say maybe in hindsight, what we should have done is just exceeded that offer by $1 million or $2 million or whatever it would have taken, and we would have had Jadeveon Clowney, and we don't make this trade, and we keep our draft pick, and we're not in this situation, and we have Jadeveon Clowney on our line in addition to all the rest of the monsters we have. So that would be a fair criticism. But other than that, if let's say Woody said no, maybe Joe wanted to do that. And Woody said, no, I'm not doing a 2-year deal for Clowney. We wanted him on a 1-year deal only. Well, then Joe Douglas's hands are tied. So you can only do what the owner lets you do when it comes to the money. So that's the only real criticism I would have in the whole situation is I would have just signed Jadeveon Clowney and not gotten into this malcontent situation with Reddick. But he went to Carolina, and then our plan D essentially was let's go get Reddick and we'll figure out the contract, and that didn't work out. That's my take on it. Hater says I'd get a free month of internet. Yeah, Hater. That's what I think should happen with Phil. It's pretty ridiculous. Eggs and coffee. All right, Roger. Hope you're feeling better, Roger. Phil Adams until, yeah, exactly. He's a non-entity. So at this point, I just view it. He's not on our team. Like, he's not on our team. The team is what we got. Maybe Tack McKinley will be great. Wouldn't it be awesome if Tack McKinley, has a season and has 12 sacks or something crazy, and just basically is the same as Reddick? He's a first-round pick. Maybe in this scheme, he's healthy now. Whatever happened to him in the past. What if Tack McKinley turns out to be Hassan Reddick? Pretty unlikely, but but something to think about. Sluggo says he's a head case. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I just don't understand how you have very good representation like Tory Dandy and Jimmy Sexton of CAA, and this is what you're doing. I don't get it. I really don't. Unless they all thought that the Jet, I mean, the thing is, these people should understand how Joe Douglas operates by now. Maybe they think Joe Douglas is going to get fired. There's a new article out today about how Joe Douglas is on the hot seat and he doesn't have a new contract, and this is the last year of his contract. Maybe they thought Joe Douglas would feel pressure because he doesn't have a new contract, and he would just cave. But if you look at the whole history of Joe Douglas, the man does not blink. He does not blink. He will give you a fair market deal. Look what he did with Michael Carter and others, Quinnen Williams. He'll give you a fair market deal, and if it's at a position of great need and we just absolutely got to have you, he might go above market like we did with Lake and Tomlinson. That turned out to be a mistake, but in terms of the money. But generally speaking, he will give you a fair market deal, and he's not going to go all Mike McCagnon and John Idzik on you and give you all kinds of money you don't deserve. He'll give you a fair market deal, and he's a tough negotiator. He does not blink often. And so I think they just misread Joe Douglas as far as I can tell. But the realistic way to think about it is these agents should have like a playbook for every single general manager, like where they're tracking everything that they do. Right? This is their business. You think about the agents. We're going to talk about the Players Association here in a second. But you think about the agents, right? What are they doing on a daily basis? They're not negotiating contracts all day, all through the season. There's certain times when they're hot and heavy with the contracts, but then most of the year they're not. So what are they doing? What they should be doing, and I would assume they do this, they should have a playbook for every general manager to understand the types of deals they do, the type of deals they like, how they like to structure the contracts, how they don't like to structure the contracts, what positions they spend on, what positions they don't like to spend on, and why. And they should have a whole playbook for every single general manager. There's only 32 of them. So that way, when they go into the negotiations with the general manager, they have a general idea of what they're going to get. And I would assume that they're doing that. I mean, I can't understand why they wouldn't be. What else are you doing when you're not negotiating contracts? And so they should have the book on Douglas by now. He's been a general manager since 2019 here. There's been very general trends that you could see. He will splurge on occasion, Lake and Tomlinson, but mostly you get a fair market deal, and if you don't come into the parameters that Douglas sets on a market, he'll move on to plan B, C, and D. And that's what he does. Look what he did with Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff we could have signed for 8-9, but Huff thought he could get more, so he didn't want that. So he went onto the market and he got 17. But 17 was way more than Douglas thought he was worth. And so he didn't go to 17. And he said, and he wasn't afraid of the backlash from the Jet fans, even though there was a lot over Bryce Huff, as if he was TJ Watt or something, which he's not. He's just a good player, situational player. So it's perplexing. Nobody seems to understand it. Even the agents are not getting their message out through their emissaries in the media. So I do not understand the situation at all. I think they've completely misread Joe Douglas, and perhaps they think he's in trouble because he's on the hot seat and he's just going to cave and give us $28 million a year, which he's not going to do. I think Joe Douglas was completely fair in this whole thing, and I think Reddick just misread the situation. He could have gotten a lot more money, got his 12, 13, 15 sacks in this system, whatever it is, and then get paid again next year in the offseason. That would be the reasonable way to do it if you're Hassan Reddick, but he's choosing to do this, and nobody can adequately explain why, and I can't figure it out either. That's Frankie, the GM. That's my take. Iced Mocha Nate is here. Good to see you, Nate. Phil Adams says, Reddick looked good on the menu, but when the dish was served, the meat was off. It's a strange metaphor, Phil, but okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's true. Joe says, non-entity is great, but it makes the Jets weaker. Well, yeah. Both sides are losers. Yeah, but, sometimes you have to, roll on logic. Like, logically, he should be here. So, like I said, the fair criticism is we should have just signed Jadeveon Clowney back when we had the opportunity, spent a little bit extra money, and not have the headache, and had Clowney in here for a couple of years, and so we'll see. But maybe we can replace his production otherwise with some of these UDFAs or tack McKinley. So that's what I would hope for. Harry's here. Good morning, Harry. We will be fine, Roger says. All right, so let's get going on the program. Let's do a few top topics, and then we'll go through the schedule, and we'll do a little game of who you got. Like, remember Tony Kornheiser used to say, who you got? We'll play a little who you got for each game of the season, but we'll do a few top topics, including the NFLPA. So let's see if I can share my screen. Let's see if the graduate student, by the way, right before we get into this, I did pass my final exam yesterday. Woohoo! For my graduate program. I am in graduate school, for those who don't know. I'm trying to get my MBA. So now I don't have any more exams. I just have one more capstone project to do. And once that is over, I will be done with this graduate program. So things are looking pretty good for me. Let's do screen 2. Let's share this. Let's see if we can do this. All right, so first topic. We got a report here out of Yahoo. This is about the Players Association. How will the NFLPA under Lloyd Howell approach the eventual 18-game negotiation? So we're going to get 18 games. We're going to get playing field. Remember, Frankie was the first one to tell you guys about the playing field stuff. Back in the day, longtime listeners will remember I'm the one who went into the playing surface on the field of MetLife Stadium and whatnot. Well, what about all grass? What about all these things? Well, one of the things you need to realize is that the NFL Players Association, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that the NFL Players Association is like a business. It's really operating like a business. And that's something different. And I think this is a very good thing. And let me give you an example. If you go onto LinkedIn, for example, you can see that the Players Association has job openings just like a business does. It's not like it was in The Wire, where it's just a bunch of guys sitting around going, we got to get the canal dredged to get some money in here. Like, the Players Association has real jobs. Like, here's one, Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. You could be the Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. Now, they are in Washington, D.C. I guess that's good for lobbying. But you could make anywhere from $150,000 to $175,000 plus bonus, hybrid, full-time. But these are the and here's the hiring team. Like, they have a full, like human resources department, I guess. Here's Kimberly Murray, SPHR. This is a human resources thing. And so they have human resources. They got financial planning and analysis. They got everything that a business would have. That's the thing you got to realize about the NFLPA. It's not just, negotiating with the NFL only. They got multiple revenue streams. They're like a business. And so when we look at this, they hired Lloyd Howell to run it like a business, and they are going to do so. And I think this is great news. Why is that? Because, after all, when they do go into negotiation with the league is composed of 32 business owners, pretty much, people who are business people. and they understand business. And so you have to come to the negotiation as another business entity. So we'll see how they do going forward. And I think also that the NFLPA has much more power than they've ever had. And that is because they're running their union like a business. They are getting this money in. And it's not like it was in 1987 where the NFL basically broke the union. Back in the day, that was a long time ago. Things have changed significantly. We've had several different leagues starting. You know, the UFL, the XFL, the USFL, and they've all failed to a greater or lesser extent. And the reason is because those leagues don't have these players that are in the NFLPA. And I think these players are starting to understand their value. And in addition to that, a lot of these players coming into the league now have NIL money. And so they have other sources of income other than just their salary. So it says here, the contrast was curious. Now let's make this a little bigger. The contrast was curious. Let's see. Why isn't that working? I don't know. These tools don't work so good. After Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles 4 plays into residency with a team competing on artificial surface, NFLPA Executive Director Lloyd Howell, new guy, released a statement. He said, moving all stadium fields to high-quality natural grass surfaces is the easiest decision the NFL can make, he said. The players overwhelmingly prefer it, and the data is clear. Great point I've been making for years now. And now the Players Union, as I've said all along, is making it one of their top priorities, and that's how you're going to get this done. Howell was just 3 months into his tenure, and he seemed that he was not afraid to speak out on behalf of his players. But fast forward 7 months, Howell's approach shifted. And that is because after Roger Goodell joined Pat McAfee's show, he started talking about 18 games in the regular season. And Goodell says 18-2, meaning 18 regular season games, 2 preseason games. But then Howell and Jalen Reeves-Maben, newly elected president, so Howell's like the CEO, and then they have a player president. They said nothing at the time. They did not come out with a statement about this 18 games. Why? The writer asks. Good question. Well, get to know Howell better, and one realizes that his silence does not always mean agreement. Sometimes the 4th ever NFLPA Executive Director silence is strategic. So I love this. This is what we need more of. So this is called strategic decision making. You know, sometimes you want to say something, sometimes you don't. And it's based on a strategy that you have that's predetermined about how you're going to win. And Howell said, I'm looking for what's the win-win? How do we win and they win? I acknowledge there'll be disagreements along the way, but we'll work through that. But it can't be a food fight on every single issue. It's got to be what's in the best interest of our membership and then what's in the best interest of the owners. So I think this is great news. I think they're taking exactly the right tack here. Now, the other thing that we've talked about on this channel is that I think they should even set their sights even higher. Why can't the NFLPA get a 1% stake in all of the teams? That way they have an ownership stake in all the teams. And if any of the teams get sold, they would then participate in that sale and get some liquidity, which is just, as we all know, straight cash money. So we're talking about the field, that we may get that in a few years. But, you know, the league wants 18 games. Okay, then they got to be played on grass. Sorry. We're talking about revenue split here. But what also this man is doing, we're in the process of identifying the priorities. So he's listening to his members. And there's a lot of members, of course, in this union. So they're going to find out what the priorities are. And hopefully enough of them talk about the grass fields as a priority that it's number one on the list, non-negotiable. Got to go to all grass. Got to give me 2 or more buys, 2, 3, 4 buys. I say 4 buys. Why not? You want to reduce injuries? We want a reduction in injuries. Well, one way to reduce injuries, have more bye weeks. That's more recovery. We need that, especially if we're going to have more games. So, multiple high-ranking team executives told Yahoo Sports that they view the 18th regular season game as a matter of when, not if. Okay, well, if that's the case, then we need to get some concessions. And we can do so in the meantime, getting some concessions and some things done. Don't have to wait until the next CBA, which is in 2030, which was also a mistake to negotiate a long-term CBA, in my opinion, but it was done before this new director is in there. But you can also get some things done beforehand. You don't have to wait until 2030 to negotiate all things. If you can get agreement, you can get agreement. So it says Howell represents roughly 2,400 players, including the Peace Squad members. So that's a lot of members to take care of. But I think this also says something about equity. Yeah, here it is. Here's the money shot right here. Guys are picking up the word equity in a variety of ways. So I think that these players are becoming way more sophisticated in their financial sort of understanding and financial, the way they think about their finances now. And I think they're thinking about the word equity. I think eventually we got to have a situation where the players union owns some small part of all the teams, in my opinion. That's a way out there opinion right now, but I think what you're going to find is in 5 or 10 years, it's not going to be a way out there opinion. It's just like when I started talking about the grass fields, everybody told me I was crazy. Now it's in the mainstream. Now this is what we're talking about. 5 or 10 years from now, we're going to be talking about the NFLPA owning, and it only can be, it could be like a 1%. Not saying it's got to be 50-50. Give us 1%. Give us 2%. Now we're owners. Now we're committed. Now we have management and labor alignment because the players are part owners in the teams, even if it's a small percentage. And then if the team gets sold, they get liquidity into the union and that they can use that for various things, just like a business. So there you go. I think this is moving in a positive direction. I think the union finally understands how much power it really has. They have money, which you need to have, which is why you have, all of these things. You don't need a director of financial planning and analysis if you got no money, right? So they're thinking about all these things. So Hader says, sounds like 18 games, 2 bye weeks, and open air. Yeah, interested to see if NFLPA can pull off the 2 ladder for the former. We'll see. But they have to be willing to strike, and that's part of the problem, and that's also part of the reason they need money to come in so that they can legitimately threaten to strike, because the players' careers are so short here as opposed to like basketball or baseball that they have in the past not been really willing to strike. They may say they could do that, but the owners knew that's not really realistic. But if they have a big stockpile of cash, they could legitimately do it and say, we're going to run training facilities across the country. We're going to open 10 training facilities. They already exist. We're going to occupy 10 training facilities. We're going to pay for the trainers, the nutrition people, the coaches, and we're going to train for a year and then come back next year while we're on strike. That takes a lot of money. But that's what they need to get there, is to legitimately say, yeah, we'll strike, no problem. See what happens when there's a year missing in your precious little league, owners. But they got to get to that point where they're legitimately willing to do that. And that's been the problem. They've gotten some good concessions over the years, but they need to have that nuclear option available. Not that you want to do it, but it needs to be available as a legitimate threat when it comes down to the nitty gritty of the things the owners don't want to do. You got to have the nuclear option available. So let's see. Sluggo says, yeah, well, they're not going back to the old ways. Sluggo always wants to go back to the old ways. Let's do it like they did it in 1968. I don't think that's the way they're going to do it. I mean, if you think about it, Sluggo, the Jets were able to, Sala talked about it, we did more of a difficult schedule this year for scheduling our workouts and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And he said they put in, what, 800 more plays than they did last year or something they were able to practice? But all within the confines of the CBA, right? So I don't think we're going backward to that. I don't think the union would ever agree to that. Now, they're talking about the ways to reschedule and reconfigure the off-season program. I'm not sure that these voluntary workouts really have worked the way they wanted. So they might tweak the schedule that way to where maybe there aren't any voluntary, but there's fewer involuntary, something like that. Or maybe they condense the schedule down. They're talking about different ways to do it, but I don't think we're going back to the old ways, Sluggo. I don't think so. Hader says the NFL will give private equity. Yeah, this is exactly right, Hader. So we talked about this previously about the private equity groups. So they're letting private equity in for 10%, and that's in the news and should be talked about more, but you don't see the Schechters and the Rappaports talking about this much. Why? I don't know. But but they let that in, and so but the players union, you can bet, is taking a look at that and go, especially with this new guy here, Lloyd Howell, who seems to know what he's doing. He's looking at it going, wait a minute. We could have private equity get 10%, but the players union doesn't get anything? I mean, that's another key point, Hader. Like, they should be looking at that and going, well, wait a minute. You're letting private equity in. How about a little player equity? And you're giving them 10%. How about we get 1 or 2 or 5 or some percent like that? And if you had, I think this idea is the best idea in the world, because I think the best idea in the world, but I think it's a great idea to give the players equity, and then the union can dole it out to the members however they see fit. But think about a world in which the players union owns a part of the franchise, that the franchise is in the league, so that all decisions that the members make, aren't. They're not always so antagonistic toward the owners, because they're owners now to a small degree, but still, I think that's the way to go. Get everybody's incentives aligned in the same way, and then, you're going to have better outcomes, I think. Sluggo says 300. Okay, I said 800. Must be 300 plus, but still he was able to get these 300 plus more reps in the current, configuration. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how the Jets do injury wise this year, if it has any effect at all. All right. Next news. Let me know if you guys could hear that bell. Next news, Matt Ryan. So today is the first day of the season, so you're going to get the pregame shows around 12 o'clock Eastern time. And guess what? Matt Ryan's going to be on there. Tom Brady is going to be announcing, as we all know. But this says Matt Ryan would like to reintroduce himself to you. Here he is, so Matty Ice. Did you know that he will be doing CBS? So it says he started preparing and blah, blah, blah. But on Sunday, the 39-year-old will share even more opinions, debuting as a full-time studio analyst for CBS's new Look pregame show. So guess what? Boomer Esiason, fired. Phil Simms, out of here. Goodbye. And they're replaced with different people. This is the crew on CBS now. You got James Brown, he was there before. You got Bill Cowher, run the ball and play defense. He was there before. Nate Burleson is relatively new. Last few years they brought him in. Now you're going to have this guy, J.J. Watt, and this guy, Matty Ice Ryan. So this is your new crew on CBS. This is your new crew on CBS. So look forward to that. No more Boomer Esiason, no more Phil Simms. You're going to have Matt Ryan. You're going to have Bill Cow. I think this guy is the one who's going to be out next. He's getting a little up there in age. You notice they're getting younger. This guy retired in the last few years. This guy is basically a media superstar. Nate Burleson can do whatever he wants. He's amazing on the show, I think. Then you got this guy, 39-year-old, just retired. So they're going to a younger demographic. In a few years, you could see somebody like Sean McVay replace this guy if he ever wants to give up coaching. And then we don't have to have Bill Cowher tell us, you got to play defense. Where's the defense? So look for that on CBS today at noon when those programs come on. Quickly, a resource. Speaking of old coaches, did you know that John Gruden has a new YouTube channel? Yeah, it's called Gruden Loves Football. Now, say what you want about old John Gruden. Maybe he's a misogynist. Maybe he's a racist. I'm not sure. Got those emails. I don't know what he was doing in emails. But the guy knows football. And now he has a YouTube channel. Gruden Loves Football. This is brand new. I think he started it in the last week. And he's breaking down all this stuff 2 days ago, 23 hours ago, 3 days ago, 5 days ago, maybe the last week or two, he started this channel. And you can get it. And what I can tell you is John Gruden, one of the smartest football men you'll ever, see. So I would highly recommend the fact that you have this old coach. He calls himself in the Fired Football Coaches Association. He's from the FFCA, the Fired Football Coaches Association. And he's given his opinions on all the games and such. Nobody wants to hire him, so he just said, screw it. I'll do my own freaking YouTube channel and do it straight to YouTube. Give it to the people direct. We'll do it live, he said. So I would say that's another new resource on the scene. So let's start getting into the games this week. We've already had a couple of games this week played. So let's go to the Frankie from Flatbush X account. Let's open this up. So if you're not following me on X, I would highly recommend that you do. I put out, I think, pretty good information, in my opinion. So you might be wondering, well, what's going on for these two games I already played? What about the ex-Jets? They were playing. So here you can see I wrote about Mekhi Becton. Mekhi Becton, some of you may or may not know. Mekhi Becton moved from tackle to guard when he got signed by the Eagles. He beat out Tyler Steen for the starting job. And so I was watching Mekhi to see how he would do. In the eye test, he was doing pretty darn good. Now, it was mostly combo blocks, I noticed that he was doing. But maybe that's part of the plan for Mekhi. Stoutland plan. So those who don't know, the offensive line coach for the Philadelphia Eagles is Jeff Stoutland. And Jeff Stoutland's one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. So, and widely regarded as such. And so maybe he thought, okay, let's take this guy, move him to guard. We already have two tackles here. So the initial idea was, okay, Mekhi's going to be a backup swing tackle, but he moved him over to guard, and he outplayed Tyler Steen. Steen also got injured, unfortunately for him, and then that gave Mekhi a chance, and now he's starting at right guard for the Eagles. But maybe Stoutland realized, hey, if you take this guy off an island and put him inside where he can get help, maybe that's the key. And so PFF graded him out as the sixth best player on Philly's offense, 73.8 grade, 80 on pass blocking, 68.1 run blocking, 97.4% pass blocking efficiency, which is good. Only 2 pressures allowed. No penalties for Mekhi. So I think if the knee holds up, I think maybe you could see Mekhi Becton as a guard in this league. And remember, he only signed a 1-year deal with the Eagles. So if he performs well, maybe he uses that to get a big contract as a guard moving forward. Well, what about Bryce Huff? How did he do in his first game? Well, not too good. The field was wet and slippery, as we all saw. It was a slip and slide out there. Well, that's not good. And it's especially not good for Bryce Huff because he needs get off and speed. And so I think that field was probably a factor as to why he was not a factor in game one. PFF graded him as the fourth worst defender on Philly. He got a 47.6 overall grade. Not good for a guy you paid $17 million per year for. Not too good. 52.1 against the run, 48.8 for pass defense. This is basically pass rush. Now, this grade right here is curious. We all know Huff is better than that. So that's why I think the field really played a role there. He ultimately had 1 tackle, no pressures, according to PFF. But I would expect an uptick in his production as he gets back home. I don't think you're going to see a lot of games with 1 tackle, no pressures, 17 million. If that continues to happen, Philadelphia fans will be up in arms, and Howie Roseman perhaps won't be thought of as a genius as he is now. Also, if you notice in the game that the Chiefs played, Kingsley Suamatia, not pronouncing that right. I think we should call him Kingsley Sumo for short, but he looked pretty bad. Starting tackle, rookie. Chris Collinsworth was trying to gas him up, and even the highlights that the truck pulled up for Collinsworth's praise was not great. Now, PFF also agreed with my eyes. He was the worst graded player on the Kansas City offense. He wound up with a 48.9 overall grade, 61.4 in pass blocking, 37.3 in run blocking. So that's not good for a starting tackle. Maybe he improves. He's just a rookie, but not an impressive debut for sure. The other main thing I would say is the Ravens' offensive line looked pretty terrible. Lamar took a lot of hits, and they were talking about how he lost a lot of weight, was thinned down. Well, that's not great for taking a lot of hits. And I thought maybe that the Ravens' plan was not to invest in the offensive line because Lamar is so dynamic, and that may work in the short term. But obviously in the long term, there's a big injury risk by doing that. So we'll have to see how that works out. Maybe it was just a week one thing, and maybe these guys will all improve. Falele is also another giant that they moved inside. So remember, he's very tall and big, and he started out as tackle. They moved him into guard. Then you got Voorhees and Macari and Rosengarten's a rookie. They all did not fare well in this game, but they're kind of young, and so maybe they will improve as the season moves on. All right, so that's it as far as top topics is concerned. Let's take a look at these games. The slate of games we got going on today is Sunday, September the 8th. We got Steelers against your Falcons. We got the Artie Smith Bowl here. Artie Smith Bowl. So as you may remember, Artie Smith was the head coach of the Flakons. He got fired. Now he's the offensive coordinator for the Steelers. Now reports out of Pittsburgh are that looks like Russell Wilson probably will not play, and it's going to be Justin Fields. He's got a calf injury. So it'll be interesting to see, because if you think about it, Arthur Smith wants to run the ball even with his quarterbacks, and who better to do that with than Justin Fields? So it may be actually better for Arthur Smith if Fields wins the job, or if Wilson, is injured and then Fields plays well and keeps the job. It may be better for what Arthur Smith wants to do. Maybe not good news for George Pickens and George Pickens owners. But we got the Steelers at the Falcons. I think the Falcons are a pretty strong team. It's going to depend upon, of course, how good Kirky Cuzzo is in his new place. He had gotten so comfortable in Minnesota. He was like a robot. If you watch Kirk Cousins play in Minnesota, very robotic in that back foot hits, ball comes out. He was very comfortable in that offense. How comfortable is he going to be in the Falcons offense? Coming off the Achilles injury for one. Not that he ran a lot at all. But He does have to come back from that injury, and then how comfortable is he in the offense? So that's something to watch. And of course, the Steelers are going to have a good defense as they always do. So who you got in the Artie Smith Bowl? You taking the Steelers or you taking the Falcons? Let me know in the chat. As for myself, I think I will go with the Falcons. The Steelers quarterback situation is unsettled. They've been having Russell Wilson be quarterback one all camp, but then all of a sudden he's got the calf injury. So now they're going with Fields. I'm going to take the Falcons. I think the Falcons are much improved. They have a good defense. They have an excellent offensive line. They got Bijan Robinson. They got the tight end Pitts. They got, Drake London. They got all these people. I think this is the year the Falcons have a good year, finally, with Kirky Cuzzo on as the trigger man. So I would say I'm taking the Falcons. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. Penix has better talent than, but he's not playing, Sluggo. So we got to see what Penix is an amazing prospect. I'll give you a inside scoop about why the Falcons did what they did. So if you remember when Arthur Smith first interviewed for that job back a few years ago, it was basically between him and the coach they have now. The defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, former defensive coordinator of the Rams, is now the head coach of the Falcons. Well, when Smith got the job back when he did, Morris was also a candidate at that time. And the difference between the two candidates, Raheem Morris, they asked him, well, what are your thoughts on the quarterback position? He said, well, you got to have it. You have to spend resources, either money or draft picks. You got to have the right quarterback to win in the league. And Arthur Blank and the team hiring said, okay. Then they asked Arthur Smith. They said, what are your thoughts on the quarterback situation? And he said, I can make it work with any quarterback. Give me Desmond Ridder, give me Tyler Heineke. We can make it work. Heineke. Well, turns out that he couldn't make it work with those quarterbacks. And so they, last few years they've been struggling along, 7 wins and so forth. And so he got fired. And then when they brought Raheem Morris back and they said, Raheem, to interview again for the head coaching job. And Raheem basically said, well, I told you guys that the last time that you can't just have anybody back there. You have to have the franchise guy. And they said, okay, you're right. We were wrong. And they hired Raheem back. And then what did they do? In the offseason, they gave $100 million to Kirk Cousins, and they spent the 8th overall pick on Michael Penix to make sure not only do we have the guy for now, we're gonna groom a guy for later with Penix. So that's the situation with the Falcons. I think they're set up well. Kirk Cousins for a year or two, and then you hand the reins over to Penix, let him get his feet wet in the league, and also serve as a backup in case anything happens with Cousins. And now you have 2 guys. And in the league these days, it's not like the old days where it was like if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. And it's like, no, these days you need 2 or 3 because of the new rules about the head injuries and stuff like that. Your quarterback can be out a lot easier than in the old days. Phil Adams says Steelers with Fields playing hungry. Yeah, well, they're both going to be playing hungry. But, yeah, Fields has to show himself. So I guess Phil's taking the Steelers. All right, next game. We got the Cardinals and Bills. I think this is a pretty easy one to pick. I think we got to go with the Bills. The Bills have the stronger roster here. Josh Allen, even though they're in their down year, they're taking their medicine year. They have a stronger roster than the Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals could surprise. They've played surprisingly well with the roster they have. Kyler Murray is coming back, so we'll see how he does. They got Maserati Marv out there out of the draft, so they could surprise, but the Bills are at home. I would say this is a pretty easy game to call. Bills are going to win this one, my opinion. Titans and Bears. This is at the Bears. Of course, we got a rookie quarterback here, second-year quarterback here. Will Levis against Caleb Williams. This one's a tricky one. They're both kind of rebuilding. The Titans are signed a lot of free agents. That typically does not work out well for teams when they do that. It means you got a lot of holes on your roster. The Bears have been steadily building. They have a good roster now. The question is, how good is Caleb Williams? So it's a question mark. We don't know. He's been looking pretty good in preseason and all that. And how good is Will Levis going to be for the Titans? So there's a lot of unknowns here. I would say, yeah, Harrison Jr. could light up the Bills secondary. That's certainly true. We got to see how does Kyler and Harrison have the connection, the good connection going just yet. We got to see how good Maserati Marv is going to be. This is a tough game, but since it's at the Bears, I will pick the Bears. Titans are kind of rebuilding. We don't know what Levis is yet. There's a lot of free agents on that team that they signed. Usually when you do that, they don't mesh very well. But it could work out. They've improved their roster. They also have a rookie head coach. We don't know how that's going to work out. I'd go with the Bears. Then we have the Patriots and Bengals. This is an interesting game. The Patriots have no offensive line, and it's getting more and more unhealthy as the time goes on. City Sal got injured. This one got injured. That one injured. But the Bengals also may not have their main weapons. Higgins has an injury. Chase probably limited because he hasn't been in camp because of his contract, and he also has an illness. But nonetheless, the Patriots have a poor roster. They're also hit by injuries on the offensive line in particular. I think the Bengals defense is going to feast. They did go with Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback with the Patriots. But the Bengals, even though they don't have some of their weapons, I say it's at home for the Bengals, and also Joe Burrow coming back. I'll pick the Bengals on that one. Patriots just don't have the roster. They're rebuilding. They have too many holes on the roster. They traded away Matt Judon. So I will take the Bengals. Texans at Colts. This is an interesting game. Stroud, will he have any second-year jitters? Is he going to have a sophomore slump? They got Diggs now, so the Texans have a very good roster. The Colts are sort of rebuilding, but they have Richardson coming back. How will AR do in his second year? With this one, I think you got to go with the Stroud boys until they prove otherwise. They have a very solid roster. DeMeco Ryans seems to be a good coach. I'm going to take the Houston Texans in that one. AR has a lot to prove.